watch the TV. Of course, you know, people like Rush Limbaugh. But prior to the change which took place in the Reagan administration, there was a basic requirement that if you owned a company and you had a political opinion, you could express that political opinion. But if someone else had a different political opinion, you had to allow that other different political opinion to be expressed. Because the media was owned by everyone, not by any single person. All of that is so critically important. And that's one of the things that we are dealing with presently in the context of this country, which is threatening the democratic process by allowing information to be put out which is completely inaccurate and which has political objectives, which are selfish, motivated in a particular narrow objective, contrary to the best interest of people across the country. So these are the things that we really have to pay a lot of attention to. I have also fought the consolidation of the banking sector through legislation to re-separate commercial and investment banking. Well, I appreciate your understanding of that. That's really very, very important. That act, which was repealed, known as the Glass-Steagall Act, as you know, was put into place in 1933, shortly after the election of a very good president who was coming in to deal with the Great Depression. So that's something that is also very, very important. Consolidation of financial corporations has resulted in gigantic institutions whose failure nearly crippled the entire economy. You may recall in 2008 that these types of institutions required a taxpayer-funded bailout to remain solvent. And we are still feeling the effects of that economic situation all across the country. These are the types of corporate interests that will benefit from this 5-4 Supreme Court decision. More power will go to the rich at the expense of the average American citizens, the vast majority of people across our country. Today, the concentration of wealth in the hands of the top 1% of Americans is the largest that we have seen since the Great Depression. We have more concentration of wealth in the hands of 1% of the people of our country than we have had since 1929. So this court decision only helps to promote the interest of this top 1% so they can continue to grow in both wealth and power. So how do we bring about clean elections? By providing public financing for elections is one way in which it could be done. It could be done much more effectively. Clean elections can be achieved through campaign finance reform that offers members of Congress a means to raise revenue while steering clear of corporate interests. I'm a co-sponsor of the Fair Elections Now Act, which would create a new... Well, again, I thank you. Thank you. Would create a new and voluntary structure for public campaign financing for congressional campaigns. You know, it's a simple thing. Candidates would need to raise $50,000 with contributions that would not exceed $100 per individual in order to earn an opportunity to receive additional public funding. These reforms would help candidates who receive funding in small denominations from middle-class Americans have the same opportunity to win elections as candidates who have been bought by large corporations and just funded huge amounts of money. They may not have any understanding about the democratic process, or they may not be interested in the best interest of the people across the country, but they have huge amounts of funding, or huge amounts of money. I know that because I know what it's like to have to raise huge amounts of money every 2 years. It can be an awful lot of fun. I'm engaged in it once again, right now. In any case, this is something that really should be addressed and changed. So what can Congress do to mitigate the effects of the Supreme Court decision? There are currently a whole host of bills introduced in Congress that will help mitigate the effects of this Supreme Court decision through a wide variety of ideas. Let me just mention a couple here. Some include strengthening disclosures. The Supreme Court ruling upheld certain disclaimer requirements, but it has been suggested that we expand the current requirements by requiring corporations to list major donors in their political advertisements. Increased disclaimer requirements will reduce the incentive for special interest groups to donate funds if they do not want to be specifically named in commercials. Currently, the Federal Election Campaign Act, that FECA Act, has certain donor disclosure requirements. But these requirements are easily manipulated and circumvented. So only a small fraction of donors to organizations that engage in political activity are actually reported to the Federal Election Commission. Congress can strengthen the disclosure requirements for corporations by making corporations publicly disclose all of their donors. It's just a simple, straightforward, honest thing to do. Grand shareholder protection is another approach. Congress is also considering legislation that would amend federal securities laws to require a corporation to provide notice to shareholders of corporate political spending, and or to require that shareholders authorize corporate political spending. This would give shareholders a voice on how their money will influence political elections. Protecting against foreign influence is something also that is important. And it's important because of the way in which we have so many corporations in this country go out to other places around the world, other countries, where they are being very successful economically, but not interested in being successful in maintaining the democratic process here in the United States. The Supreme Court did not invalidate the law that prohibits so-called foreign nationals from making expenditures related to U.S. elections. Foreign nationals include corporations organized in other countries and foreign and political parties. This designation does not adequately address multinational corporations and still allows loopholes for foreign interests to sway political campaigns. Tightening up these loopholes would eliminate some degree of corporate spending on these U.S. elections. And that would be something that would be relatively easy to do, but something that is very important to do. So is there any way to undo this recent Supreme Court decision? And we've heard it. We've heard it before. Clearly it was expressed. The only way to formally undo this decision is by passing a constitutional amendment or through another Supreme Court ruling. In the 111th Congress, proposals have been introduced that would amend the Constitution. In accordance with Article 5 of the Constitution, such joint resolutions would require approval by 2/3 of each House, would become effective upon ratification by the legislatures of 3/4 of the states, and specify that approval is required within 7 years from the date of submission. In other words, after the bill has been introduced, the amendment has been introduced, it's got to be completed in 7 years, or you've got to start over again. That's the way the system is founded and laid up. So I am, desperately a co-sponsor of H.J. Resolution 74. This bill would amend the Constitution, allowing Congress and state assemblies to regulate corporations' expenditures for political speech on the federal and state level. The bill also explicitly states that this amendment cannot abridge the freedom